All right, we are back. I'm here in Glendale, Arizona. State Farm Stadium is just about maybe 3 or 4 football fields away to my right here. My 16th training camp stop. I have now seen 15 teams. We have a lot to cover over the next couple of weeks, and we'll cover all of it. But we wanted to get back to you with a Breer report this morning here from the second to last stop of my big training camp swing, so I get some answers to some of your questions, because we haven't done a mailbag either print or on video in a while. So our first question is coming from Prince Saw. That's at not that underscore Prince. Any new trends you're noticing with your training camp visits and its potential impact? Well, one thing I think I've noticed continuously over the last few years is the way that coaches and teams continue to switch up the way that they're handling training camp. There are such strong restraints now on what they can do, the amount of hours they can spend out there, the amount of contact, that there are varying approaches. Now, some teams you see they've backed way off of their players and they don't have them in pads very much. There are other teams that have leaned in. One very notable one's the Broncos under Sean Payton. It's a very Parcellsian training camp, or as much as you can be Parcellsian in 2025 with the longer practices, 9-on-7 drills. You see some other teams where pace is really important. I'd say the Pete Carroll adjacent teams are in that category. And I had a good conversation with Brian Schottenheimer about this when I was in Dallas, and how much they're trying to do with 11-on-11 work, and how the idea is they want the players playing the sport of football as much as they possibly can. Drill work is great, and you need all of that. The fundamental work is important. But they've done less 9-on-7, less 7-on-7, because they want to have as much 11-on-11 work as possible. So the varying approaches to practice is one thing that's definitely there. The other thing, I'd say, just from a football strategy standpoint, would be what we're seeing with offensive players. And I think the continuation of the idea of positionless football. That's something that I think the Niners are a team that really leaned into that over the last few years under Kyle Shanahan, and their ability to move guys like Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey around, with the idea being that when you break the huddle, your 5 skill players, the defense does not know where they're going. And so I think we're going to see some cool stuff with some of these guys. One thing when you talk to coaches about the rookie running backs, whether, I was just with the Chargers, Omari and Hampton there, RJ Harvey in Denver, obviously Ashton Genty with Vegas. The one thing that keeps coming up is, do these guys have 3-down value? And what that basically means is, can these guys contribute in the passing game? Can we trust them in long yardage, where they might be in pass protection? And so versatility for offensive players is more important than it's ever been. And this idea of the positionless player, whether he's primarily a receiver, primarily a tight end, primarily a running back, the idea that you can move them around is becoming more and more important in today's NFL. And one of the more interesting examples of that, I think, going forward this year is going to be with a rookie in Indianapolis who isn't a receiver and isn't a running back. It's a tight end. It's Tyler Warren, who I think the Colts are going to line up in the backfield and move around quite a bit. So this is in part a result of what's coming from college football and guys that do more at that level. But it's also schematically where the game has gone. And so I think more and more we're going to see players being moved around the formation and put in different spots. And that even goes for, again, a guy like Ashton Genty, who was a pretty traditional running back at Boise State, but has shown early in camp with the Raiders that he is able to do a multitude of things. Question number 2 is from Lost Deuce. Hey, Breer, what's more important, joint practices or preseason games? I would say without question the joint practices are more valuable to the coaches. There's a few reasons for it. You get more reps, and you can, and that's important. They can rep over and over and over again. You get to see more players in these situations, because you can do split fields where you can have 1s over here and 2s over here, and so you can create more reps within the practice. You can also generate situations, and while playing in a game setting is important because players need to get used to the rhythm of the game and handling things. Handling things on the fly and dealing with things as they come up, like that's important. In the joint practices, they can generate situations where it's still unpredictable. You can generate a 3rd and 14, but still not know what the defense is doing if you're the offense, and same thing the other way around. You can generate a 2nd and 6, and if you're the defense, you still don't know what the offense is doing. So I think that plus the one-on-one work that you're able to do, I think they're really important to teams, and they become more and more important to teams because your ability to generate matchups, your ability to generate situations, your ability to generate scenarios that you feel like you need to see. The other area where it really helps is in assessing your roster. For a lot of these teams, it's tough to cut down to 53. If you have depth on your roster, you're going to have some hard decisions to make. And getting to see your players against a group of players that they haven't played against, that they don't know, that they haven't been practicing against day after day after day, where they get used to the tendencies and the habits of the guys they're going against, can be really important and informative when it comes to assessing who your players are and also where your roster is. That's the other piece of it is, there's always that thing in training camp when the offense looks great. What does that say about the defense? Well, when you get to see them again, see your offense against a different defense and your defense against a different offense, it gives you maybe a little bit more of a realistic point of context for grading your players, grading your position groups, and figuring out your needs. @_installation04. What is the most worrying offseason injury heading into the preseason? I would give you two. I think the first one for me, with a bullet, is Anthony Richardson. A shoulder injury, a throwing shoulder injury, especially when it's a repeated, and I'm not going to use the word chronic, but repeated injury to a throwing shoulder of a quarterback is a tough thing to deal with. And I know, he was fine to start training camp and all systems go. And, he's been able to compete for the starting job with Daniel Jones, and we'll see where that goes. But when a player that young at that position has a injury to his throwing shoulder, that's always something worth paying attention to. So to me, like I've just learned over the years that whether it's an elbow, a wrist, a shoulder, anything on the throwing arm is important to watch. And look, like you could say Matthew Stafford, right, with the back, and he's dealing with that. And that's like a maintenance thing at this point. The back, the elbow, the wrist, with Matthew Stafford, we've seen those injuries, but he's 37. So there's a little bit of a natural, like a natural course of a guy's career that can take place where those injuries will come up. I've been told by a lot of coaches that, almost any quarterback into his 30s, could have shoulder surgery because there's just enough fraying and wear and tear that you get to that point. When it happens earlier in a guy's career, I think it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on. The other one that I think is flown under the radar a little bit, but Tristan Wirfs. And not only his health, like I'd expect that he'll be back somewhere within the first month of the season, but are they getting a full-on version of Tristan Wirfs? Because Tampa's offensive line is the identity of that team. It's the strength of that team. They've done a great job building it up. But one thing you learn about left tackles, and I don't know that left tackle is quite as important or maybe seen quite the same way it was 10 or 15 years ago, because now you can have a great pass rusher on either side. If you've got a deficiency at right tackle, a lot of times teams will move their best pass rusher over to that side to take advantage of it. So it's not as much of a one-for-one thing as it used to be, where it was the best pass rusher was going to be on the open side and your left tackle was going to be dealing with him every week. But I do think there's an element there where if you don't have that position taken care of, you sort of have nothing. And so I'd put Tristan Wirfs in that category where I'd be concerned about that one. I'd also be concerned about Alaric Jackson with the Rams, a really good young left tackle who the Rams think is still getting better. Jackson's dealing with blood clots, so that's a scary deal. So that's something where they think that he's going to be okay. And there's examples of guys over the last few years. Trey Smith is a great one. Like a lot of people thought he wouldn't be able to play NFL football. He's turned into an all-pro level player. Christian Barmore in New England came back from blood clots. So it's not like this is unprecedented or players haven't dealt with it before, but it is a scary deal for a player. So, and I put the situation with Jackson similar to Wirfs, where like the Rams can look at the offensive line as a strength of their team. But if you take the left tackle out of the equation, now you're talking about having, I think, a lot of moving parts and a lot of big picture questions. So give you Richardson in Indianapolis, Wirfs in Tampa, and Jackson in LA. Appreciate you guys coming out. I appreciate you guys checking out all of our training camp videos. Again, this will be camp number 16 for me. I've been to the Lions, the Vikings, the Packers, the Bears, the Colts, the Bengals, the Browns, the Bills, the Seahawks, the Niners, the Raiders, the Broncos, the Rams, the Cowboys, the Chargers. Today I'll see the Cardinals. Tomorrow I'll see the Chiefs. So it'll be over half the league. When I get my flight back to Boston tomorrow, I'm happy to field all of your questions. We'll do a print mailbag and a video mailbag next week. We'll have Breer Report coming for you on Friday. Again, we're going to get back to our more regular schedule here soon. Again, check out all of our training camp videos, though we have takeaways from now 15 of the 32 training camps up online. We will see you guys on Friday with another Breer Report.